You know that feeling when you've spent 3 hours color coding your productivity planner, designing the perfect morning routine spreadsheet, and researching the best methods to organize your life, but the actual task you're supposed to do, still not done? If you're nodding right now, keep watching, because what's happening in your brain when you plan versus when you actually do something is fascinating, and understanding it might explain why you're stuck. Here's what most people don't realize. Planning and execution activate completely different reward systems in your brain. When you're planning, your brain gets a dopamine hit from imagining the future. It's pleasurable. You feel productive without the risk of failure. But here's where it gets strange. Research from Beijing Normal University found that while planning and execution should work together, they're actually in tension with each other. The more time you spend planning, the less likely you are to execute. Not because you're lazy, but because your brain is getting what it needs from the planning itself. Think about the last project you mapped out in detail. Maybe you made lists, researched tools, created timelines. Felt great, didn't it? That's not an accident. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and future thinking, lights up during planning. You're essentially experiencing a preview of success without any of the actual work. The problem is your brain can't fully distinguish between imagining success and achieving it, so you get a reward without the execution. You've tricked yourself into feeling accomplished. But wait, there's something else happening that most people miss entirely. When you dive into planning mode, especially if you're a perfectionist, you're not just organizing your thoughts, you're buying insurance against failure. Every extra hour spent planning feels like protection. More research, better preparation, perfect conditions, these become your shield. Psychologists call this the perfectionism-procrastination loop, and it's brutal. The irony? You're so afraid of not doing something perfectly that you never actually start. The fear isn't about being lazy, it's about being imperfect. Studies show that people who spend excessive time in planning phases are often driven by what's called perfectionistic concerns, the nagging worry that your work won't meet impossible standards. Here's the fascinating part. These individuals experience genuine anxiety when faced with execution, not the motivating kind of anxiety, but the paralyzing kind. Your brain interprets starting the actual task as a threat. So what does it do? It retreats back into planning where everything feels safer and more controlled. Now let's talk about why execution feels so different. When you move from planning to doing, your brain shifts gears entirely. Suddenly, you're not in the comfortable realm of possibilities anymore. You're dealing with reality, resistance, mistakes, things not going according to plan. Your brain's reward system fundamentally changes. Instead of getting dopamine from anticipation, you need to get it from actual progress. But here's the problem. Real progress is messy and slow, and your brain has already been conditioned to prefer the quick hit that planning provides. There's a neuroscience term for what happens during execution. It's called cognitive load. Your working memory is managing multiple things simultaneously, keeping the plan in mind, executing actions, monitoring results, adjusting on the fly. It's exhausting compared to planning, which is essentially daydreaming with structure. No wonder people avoid it. The human brain will always choose the path of least resistance when given the option. Planning is mental rehearsal. Execution is mental heavy lifting. And here's where it gets really interesting. Researchers studying problem solving found that individual planning time actually has a negative effect on execution time at the task level. More planning does not lead to better execution. It leads to decision fatigue before you even begin. You've used up your mental energy designing the perfect approach instead of learning through doing. This is why some of the most productive people you know barely plan at all. They start imperfect, adjust quickly, and iterate. They figured out that execution teaches you things planning never could. So what's actually happening when you're stuck in planning mode and can't seem to start? Your brain is caught in what psychologists call analysis paralysis. You're not gathering more information to make a better decision, you're gathering information to avoid making any decision at all. The more options you analyze, the more overwhelmed your brain becomes, and the harder it is to take action. It's a protective mechanism gone wrong. Your brain thinks it's helping by being thorough, but it's actually imprisoning you in preparation. The truth is, people who love planning but hate doing aren't broken. They're not lazy or disciplined. They're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about how change actually works. Planning feels like progress because it is a form of mental activity, just not the kind that produces results in the real world. Real progress requires accepting imperfection, tolerating discomfort, and learning through failure, all the things that planning lets you avoid. Here's what works. Treating your first action not as the implementation of a perfect plan, but as an experiment. Lower your standards deliberately. Aim for 70% instead of 100. Give yourself permission to start badly. When you do this, something remarkable happens. You interrupt the perfectionism loop. Your brain stops waiting for ideal conditions and starts learning from reality. You discover that imperfect action beats perfect planning every single time, not because planning is worthless, but because execution is where actual learning lives. The people who break this pattern don't stop planning altogether. They just change the relationship. They plan less and start faster. They use planning as a launching pad, not a destination. They've realized something crucial. Your brain will give you dopamine for checking off tasks, but only if you actually do them. The anticipation of a reward isn't the same as the reward itself. The satisfaction of completion beats the satisfaction of preparation. Always. But you have to experience it to believe it. If you recognize yourself in this pattern, here's your challenge. Pick one thing you've been planning and just start it today. Badly, imperfectly, for 10 minutes. See what happens. Your brain has been lying to you, telling you that more preparation equals better results. Test that assumption. Prove it wrong. Because the only way out of the planning trap is through action. And action doesn't require perfect conditions. It just requires you to begin.